Sometimes the best discoveries are the ones we never went looking for. That's what this video is all about. I'm the Useless Show, and today I'm sharing 183 random facts that prove learning doesn't need a purpose to be worthwhile.
So many questions. Why is the world spinning? Why is the moon keeping its orbit? Can rockets fly backwards? The facts you didn't know you needed. The Useless Show.
Carbs aren't just the stuff in bread or pasta. Deep inside your body, they're working as tiny messengers. Glycobiology is the science that studies how these sugars let your cells talk to each other and even control your immune system. Without this sweet language, your body's defenses wouldn't know when to fight or when to relax. The Roman army had a punishment so terrifying it made soldiers fear their own side more than the enemy. It was called decimation. If a unit failed or mutinied, every 10th man was randomly chosen, then executed by his comrades. Imagine standing in line, hoping fate didn't hand you the deadliest lottery ticket in history. Your brain makes weird connections without you realizing it. Say the word booba, you're gonna feel soft and round, right? Now say kiki, you're sharp and spiky. Across cultures, people agree on this. It's called the booba kiki effect, and it shows how sound and shape are mysteriously linked, even though no one ever taught us that rule. Wall Street has a trick called the green shoe option. During an IPO, if investors go crazy for a company's stock, underwriters can release extra shares to calm the chaos. It's like adding water to soup when more guests show up for dinner, stretching supply to keep everyone satisfied and the market stable. What happens when you smash volleyball, soccer, and trampolines together? You get bossa ball. Played on a giant inflatable court, it looks like a mix of Olympics and circus. Players leap, flip, and kick the ball mid-air while bouncing like acrobats. It's wild, chaotic, and easily the most gravity-defying sport you've probably never tried. Every tree is secretly a historian. Each year, it leaves behind a ring, recording details about climate, drought, and disasters. Dendrochronology is the science of reading those rings. By studying them, scientists can date ancient artifacts, track volcanic eruptions, or even uncover lost civilizations. Turns out, wood remembers everything. You just have to know how to read it. Forget an eye for an eye. The ancient Hittites thought differently. Their laws often replaced revenge with fines. Even serious assaults could be settled with money rather than blood. It wasn't mercy exactly. More like business. To them, justice wasn't about punishment, it was about payment. For the Hittites, crime literally paid, just not for the criminal. Diamonds are tough, but there's something rarer. Lonsdaleite. It's a hexagonal form of carbon, created when meteorites packed with graphite slam into Earth. In theory, it's even harder than diamond. Imagine jewelry forged from the violence of space rock collisions. Not just rare. This gemstone is practically alien armor. Before bows and arrows ruled the hunt, ancient people used a tool called the atlatl. It's a simple lever that lets you hurl spears with deadly speed and distance. Think of it as the Stone Age's sniper rifle. With an atlatl, early hunters could take down prey without getting dangerously close. Survival was all about leverage. Here's one of the strangest human quirks. In Japan, people noticed that stepping into a bookstore sometimes triggered the urge to poop. Yep, it's so common they gave it a name, the Mariko Aoki phenomenon. No one really knows why it happens, but it's proof that even our bowels appreciate the smell of fresh pages. In courtrooms, there's a Latin phrase that does the heavy lifting, res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. If a piano falls from the sky and smashes someone, you don't need proof of negligence. The accident itself is enough to suggest someone clearly messed up. There's a sport where bicycles become soccer shoes. It's called cycle ball, played 2-on-2 on fixed gear bikes with no brakes. Players maneuver and shoot the ball using only their wheels. The result looks half like a circus act, half like a competitive sport, with balance, control, and chaos all colliding on the court. Back in medieval times, magicians had a handbook. The Picatrix was a massive grimoire packed with spells, rituals, and ways to channel planetary energy. It mixed astrology, magic, and philosophy, creating a strange blend of science and sorcery. If you wanted power from the stars, this was your instruction manual. Ever seen a picture within a picture, repeating endlessly? That's the Droste effect. It's named after a Dutch cocoa tin that showed a nurse holding the same cocoa tin, which showed the same nurse again, and so on. It's like a visual loop, a photograph caught staring soaring into infinity. Some metals have a bizarre secret, superplasticity. Heat them just right, and they can stretch to several times their original length without snapping. Imagine pulling a paperclip until it's as long as a shoelace. Engineers dream of using this quirk to shape strong, lightweight materials for things like airplanes and spacecraft. For decades, IQ scores around the world kept rising, a mystery called the Flynn effect. Generations scored higher than their parents on tests of reasoning and problem solving. Whether it's better nutrition, education, or technology shaping sharper minds, the trend showed humanity seemed to be getting steadily smarter. Picture two lumberjacks standing on a log in the water, both trying to spin it under each other's feet. That's log rolling, a sport born from the timber trade. Competitors need balance, speed, and a knack for strategy. One wrong move and you're the one making a splash. The Shroud of Turin's mystery lies in its details. The faint image of a man appears only on the top 2 microfibers of the linen cloth. No paint, no brush strokes, nothing that penetrates deeper. Scientists still struggle to explain how an image so delicate could have been created centuries ago. Long before Kung Fu films, South India had Kalaripayattu, one of the world's oldest martial arts. It teaches strikes, kicks, grappling, weapon use, and even healing techniques. Practitioners move like dancers and fight like warriors, blending grace with brutality in a system that influenced many later fighting traditions. A mortgage isn't just a loan, its roots mean death pledge. From Old French, it symbolized a deal that lived until the debt was repaid or died in failure. A grim name for a house payment, but fitting, since the pledge either ends with ownership or financial ruin. Sound can make light, literally. In a process called sonoluminescence, bubbles trapped in liquid implode when blasted by sound waves, releasing tiny flashes of light. It's like a microscopic lightning storm happening underwater. Scientists still debate the exact physics, but it shows just how weirdly powerful sound can be. In medieval Europe, shipwreck laws weren't kind to sailors. Known as jus naufragii, they allowed local lords to claim anything that washed ashore from a wrecked vessel. Imagine surviving a storm at sea only to find everything you owned now legally belonged to the man on the beach. Millions of years ago, South America's top predator wasn't a big cat. It was a bird. Terror birds stood up to 10 feet tall with massive hooked beaks. Flightless but fast, they hunted like sprinting assassins. For nearly 60 million years, these feathered giants ruled before predators with sharper teeth took over. There's a way to hide a secret message in plain sight. Steganography. Unlike encryption, which scrambles text, this method conceals information inside another file. A picture might hold hidden words in its pixels. To most people, it's just an image, but for the intended receiver, it's a coded message. Investors love shortcuts, and the rule of 72 is one of the simplest. Divide 72 by your interest rate, and you'll know how many years it takes to double your money. At 6%, that's about 12 years. It's fast math that makes compound interest a little less mysterious. Step into an Ames room, and suddenly your sense of scale collapses. One person looks like a giant, the other like a child. Even if they're the same size, it's all a trick of distorted architecture, warping perspective so your brain insists on an illusion your eyes can't escape. About 541 million years ago, life exploded in creativity. The Cambrian explosion filled the oceans with bizarre creatures. Trilobites, spiny worms, armored oddities. Almost every major animal group appeared within a geological blink of an eye. It was evolution's greatest brainstorm session, setting the stage for the complex life we see today. The medieval assize of bread and ale was one of England's earliest consumer protection laws. It set rules for the price, weight, and quality of bread and beer. Bakers who cheated risked fines, pillories, or even jail. In a time when bread was survival, this law kept greed from starving the poor. A Lazarus taxon is a species that vanishes from the fossil record for ages, then reappears as if resurrected. The coelacanth is the poster child, thought extinct for 65 million years until one turned up in a fisherman's net. Nature sometimes hides, only to remind us it never left. Deja vu feels like a glitch in the Matrix, but neurologists think it's your brain misfiring. Neural pathways overlap just enough to trick you into believing you've lived the moment before. It's not prophecy or magic. just memory wires crossed, turning the present into an eerie echo of the past. The word grok came from Robert Heinlein's novel Stranger in a Strange Land. In computing, it means grasping something so deeply you become one with it. Hackers and programmers adopted it because understanding wasn't enough. To grok is to absorb knowledge until it's part of your instincts, not just your brain. The malice at the palace in 2004 was more than a foul. A hard shove spiraled into one of the NBA's ugliest brawls, with players storming into the stands and fans throwing punches back. The fallout brought suspensions, arrests, and a stain on the league's reputation that still lingers in highlight reels. The Potosi silver mines of Bolivia fueled an empire. So much silver poured out that Spain flooded Europe with coins, causing inflation that rippled across the globe. Miners worked in brutal conditions, but their mountain became a world bank. At its peak, people said a road of silver could be built to Madrid. The Leiden-Frost effect happens when water dances on a skillet. On a surface hot enough, droplets don't boil away instantly. They skate on a cushion of their own vapor. The thin layer keeps them alive longer, fizzing and darting around like quicksilver. It's physics turning heat into a magic trick. Gigantopithecus blacka was a true giant of prehistory. 3 meters tall, weighing half a ton, and walking the forests of Asia alongside early humans. Its jawbones hint at a massive vegetarian diet, but fossils are scarce. What's certain is that humans once shared land with an ape that would have dwarfed them. Ancient Mesopotamian rulers marked land rights with carved stones called kuduru. These boundary markers listed the king's grant and summoned curses from gods against anyone who dared move or deface them. Owning land wasn't just legal, it was sacred. The stone warned that breaking the deal meant angering heaven itself. The Beaufort scale turns wind into a language. Created in the early 1800s, it linked wind speeds with what sailors saw at sea or on land. Ripples, waves, bending trees, or full-blown destruction. From a calm breeze to hurricane force, it gave mariners a shared code to measure nature's temper. The Tully monster, or Tullimonstrum gregarium, looked like evolution doodled outside the lines. With a tube-like body, stalked eyes, and a long proboscis ending in pincers, it baffled scientists for decades. Found only in Illinois shale, this 300-million-year-old oddity was finally classified as a vertebrate, though it still feels like a prank from nature. Ukiyo-e was Japan's art of the floating world. Woodblock prints captured kabuki actors, courtesans, landscapes, and myths in bold colors that anyone could afford. Mass-produced, they spread culture like posters and postcards. Artists like Hokusai turned everyday moments into icons, giving the fleeting pleasures of Edo-era life a place in history. The legal defense of necessity argues that breaking the law may be excused if it prevents a greater harm, like smashing a window to escape a fire. Yet courts rarely accept it. Judges tend to view greater harm as a slippery excuse, which means this defense usually fails before it even gets started. The Collatz conjecture, introduced by Lothar Collatz in 1937, suggests that if you take any number, have it if even, or triple, and add 1 if odd, you will always end at 1. Mathematicians have tested trillions of numbers without finding an exception. Proof, however, still remains stubbornly absent. Stone skipping has a world championship in Easdale, Scotland, where competitors fling flat stones across water to see how many times they bounce. Kurt Steiner holds the record at 88 skips in 2013. Physics matters here. Flatter stones, lower angles, and smooth water decide who reigns as the king of skipping. Bertrand Russell's teapot analogy, written in 1952, imagines a small teapot orbiting between Earth and Mars. His idea was simple. The burden of proof lies on the person making an unfalsifiable claim, not others to disprove it. Philosophy, it turns out, sometimes needs crockery to make a point. The Panama Canal, built between 1904 and 1914, required cutting through mountains with steam shovels and lifting ships 26 meters with locks. The United States spent nearly $400 million, while over 25,000 workers died, mostly from malaria and accidents. The payoff? Ships avoid a 2-week detour around South America. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, oddly named after a German militant group from the 1970s, describes when something newly learned suddenly appears everywhere. Psychologists call it the frequency illusion. Your brain simply notices it more often, fooling you into thinking the world has suddenly conspired to put that word on every billboard. The Arthashastra, composed in the 3rd century BCE by the Indian scholar Chanakya, is a detailed manual on governance, economics, and military tactics. It covers taxation, law enforcement, diplomacy, and even spy networks. Imagine a mix of political science and espionage advice, 2,000 years before modern textbooks existed. Cheese rolling in Gloucestershire, England is an annual race down Cooper's Hill after a 4-kilogram wheel of double Gloucester cheese. Competitors tumble, crash, and often require medical attention. The cheese nearly always outpaces everyone, reminding us that dairy is surprisingly aerodynamic. The winner keeps the cheese, assuming they survive the hill. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in linguistics proposes that language shapes how people perceive the world. For example, Inuit languages distinguish many kinds of snow, influencing how speakers think about it. While debated, the theory highlights the strange possibility that vocabulary itself bends thought, turning grammar into something more than just rules. Eminent domain is a legal principle allowing governments to seize private property for public projects, provided just compensation is paid. Highways, railroads, and bridges have all relied on this power, yet compensation often feels less than fair, making citizens wonder if just is really just shorthand for you get less. The Tyndall effect, explained by physicist John Tyndall in 1869, describes how light scatters when it hits tiny particles in air or liquid. It is why sunbeams appear in dusty rooms or fog. Essentially, your messy attic doubles as a free physics demonstration every time sunlight sneaks through a crack. The mathematical constant E, discovered in the 1600s by Jacob Bernoulli, is about 2.718 and is vital in describing continuous growth or decay. It appears in compound interest, population models, and radioactive decay. Like pi, it hides everywhere. Your savings account unfortunately demonstrates a far more painfully than beautifully. Shin kicking, part of the Cotswold Olympics since the 1600s, pits 2 contestants against each other in a test of tolerance. Fighters stuff hay into trousers and repeatedly kick one another's shins until someone falls. It is combat reduced to its simplest and most painful form. Britain somehow calls this sporting tradition. The Mithric Mysteries were a Roman religion practiced from the 1st to 4th century CE, worshipping the god Mithras. Initiations took place in underground temples, or Mithraea, decorated with images of Mithras slaying a bull. The secrecy means much remains unknown, making this cult one of history's more frustrating puzzles. Supercooling allows pure water to dip below 0 degrees Celsius without freezing, provided it stays undisturbed. The moment you shake it, it instantly crystallizes into ice. This odd trick of physics demonstrates that nature can delay the inevitable, only to unleash it dramatically, like a magician saving the reveal until last. The geoid is Earth's true shape if only gravity and rotation acted on it. Far from a neat sphere, it resembles a slightly lumpy potato. Scientists use it as the reference surface for measuring elevation. Maps pretend Earth is smooth, but the geoid proves our planet has terrible posture. Droit de seigneur, the supposed medieval right of lords to sleep with a vassal's bride, is widely regarded as a myth. Historians find little evidence it was ever practiced. Still, the tale persisted for centuries, perhaps because it fit neatly into stories of corrupt rulers behaving badly on wedding nights. The Maunder minimum between 1645 and 1715 was a 70-year period of unusually low sunspot activity. It overlapped with the Little Ice Age, when Europe endured bitterly cold winters. The sun, normally full of fiery energy, seemed to take an extended nap, plunging humanity into centuries of frostier mornings. Slam ball, invented in Los Angeles in 2002, blends basketball with trampolines placed in front of each net. Players bounce into gravity-defying dunks, cushioned by padded walls. Though short-lived on television, the sport gained fans in the US and China, proof that trampolines can improve nearly any competitive activity, including basketball. The Vinland Sagas, written in Iceland around the 13th century, describe Leif Erikson's voyages to North America nearly 5 centuries before Columbus. They mention lands called Helluland, Markland, and Vinland, believed to be parts of modern Canada. The sagas mix history and legend, but archaeological finds at L'Anse aux Meadows confirm at least some of their accuracy. Peto's paradox observes that cancer rates don't increase with body size or lifespan. A blue whale has about 3,000 times more cells than a human, yet isn't riddled with tumors. Biologists think evolution gave larger animals better cancer defenses, though it does leave mice looking suspiciously unlucky in comparison. Scagliola, developed in the 17th century Italy, is the craft of faking marble using plaster, glue, and pigments, polished to a glossy finish. It became popular in churches and palaces where budgets couldn't stretch to real marble. In short, it's luxury stonework for people who want the look without the weight. The medieval Welsh laws of Hywel Dda, compiled in the 10th century, put price tags on body parts and belongings. Losing a finger, that's worth a set number of cows. Even insults could be compensated with livestock. Justice in Wales, it seems, worked like a particularly complicated shopping list. The Gibbs-Donnan effect in cell biology explains why ions arrange unevenly across a semi-permeable membrane when some molecules can't pass through. First described by physicists Josiah Willard Gibbs and Frederick Donnan, it helps explain nerve function and cell balance. In essence, your cells are forever negotiating a very unfair trade agreement. Gugu Yimithir, a language spoken by Aboriginal people in northern Queensland, Australia, doesn't use left or right. Instead, speakers give directions with cardinal points: north, south, east, west. To speak it properly, you must know where you are at all times. It's a language that forces you to be your own compass. Palmyra, in present-day Syria, was a rich caravan city linking Rome to Persia and the Silk Road. Its mix of Greco-Roman colonnades and Eastern temples reflected that crossroads. In the 3rd century CE, Queen Zenobia briefly ruled an empire from Palmyra, until Rome crushed her revolt. Today, its ruins still hint at lost grandeur. The modern 40-foot shipping container, standardized in the 1950s, includes hollow steel corner castings. These allow containers to be locked, stacked, lifted by cranes, and secured on ships or trains. The humble detail helped revolutionize global trade, making it easier to move goods worldwide than to move your couch upstairs. The Kirkpatrick sale of 1971 saw New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art auction off works it no longer wanted, including a Velázquez portrait. The sale provoked outrage. Why was a major museum selling masterpieces? It sparked long-running debates about deaccessioning, or how far museums should go in tidying their storerooms. Vierleppen, a Dutch sport dating back centuries, involves sprinting with a long pole, planting it in a canal, and climbing it as it tips forward to leap as far as possible. Distances can exceed 20 meters. It's part athletics, part circus act, and entirely proof that the Dutch hate getting wet feet. The Gutenberg Bible, printed in Mainz, Germany around 1455, was the first major book produced with movable metal type. Interestingly, Gutenberg left blank spaces in the margins, so artists could later hand-paint ornate initials and decorations. Even the dawn of mass printing couldn't quite give up on medieval flair. The Turing test, proposed by Alan Turing in 1950, measures whether a machine can imitate human conversation so well that a person can't tell the difference. It doesn't ask if machines think, only if they can fake it convincingly. In other words, intelligence is judged by passing as a chatty company. The Vamic courts of medieval Westphalia were secret tribunals dating to the 13th century, authorized to impose even death sentences. Members swore secrecy, met in hidden locations, and carved symbols into trees to announce their rulings. Justice in this case looked more like a mysterious club with very sharp consequences. The Purkinje effect, named after Czech physiologist John Purkinje, describes how human vision shifts in dim light. As illumination decreases, our eyes become more sensitive to blue-green wavelengths than reds. That's why red flowers fade at dusk while blue ones stand out. Night vision, it seems, comes with a color bias. The Soviet dead hand system, built in the 1980s, was an automatic nuclear command mechanism. If sensors detected a strike and leaders couldn't respond, it would launch missiles in retaliation. Designed to guarantee mutual destruction, it was essentially a doomsday machine that made sure no one won a nuclear war. The Pomodoro technique, created by Francesco Cirillo in the 1980s, uses a kitchen timer, originally shaped like a tomato, hence Pomodoro, to divide work work into 25-minute sessions with short breaks. It's a simple method to maintain focus, proving that sometimes productivity depends less on willpower and more on kitchen utensils. Adverse possession is a legal principle that allows someone who openly occupies another person's land for a set period, often 10 to 20 years, to claim legal ownership. The logic is that land should be used, not left idle. For property owners, it's a reminder that fences and vigilance are better than after-the-fact lawsuits. Kabaddi, in its circle-style variant, is especially popular in Punjab, India. Unlike the rectangular version seen in international matches, it is played on a circular field and skips some revival rules. The game emphasizes agility and strength, with raiders darting in and out like sprinters caught in a wrestling match. The Coanda effect, identified by Romanian engineer Henry Coanda in 1930, is the tendency of a fluid jet to cling to a curved surface. In aviation, this principle helps explain how airflow sticks to wings, enhancing lift. It's one reason airplanes fly smoothly instead of behaving like badly thrown paper planes. Pro hac vice, Latin for this occasion, allows a lawyer to appear in a court where they are not licensed, but only for a single case. The rule balances flexibility with control, letting specialized lawyers travel across jurisdictions without turning every trial into a legal free-for-all. Pesapallo, known as Finnish baseball, was created in the 1930s by Lauri Taco Pekala. It features an unusual vertical pitch and a zigzag base path. Though inspired by American baseball, the irregular field and fast pace make it a uniquely Finnish sport. Less predictable, but far more entertaining to watch. The Kessler syndrome, proposed by NASA scientist Donald Kessler in 1978, describes a scenario where orbital debris collides and fragments, creating more debris in a chain reaction. If it occurred, low Earth orbit could become impassable. Essentially, too much space junk could trap humanity on the very planet it's cluttering. The Pygmalion effect is a psychological phenomenon where higher expectations lead to improved performance. First studied by Robert Rosenthal in the 1960s, it shows how teachers' beliefs about students can shape outcomes. When people expect greatness, others often rise to meet it, though the reverse, called the golem effect, is equally true. The putting out system, used widely in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries, was a way of organizing textile production before factories. Merchants supplied raw materials to households, which spun or wove them at home. It offered flexibility, but also marked the transition toward industrialization, where central workshops replaced cottage labor. The Kelvin-Helmholtz instability occurs when two fluids move at different speeds across a shared boundary, creating rolling wave-like patterns. It explains the billowing clouds seen in the sky and even turbulence at sea. Nature in this case shows off its flair for fluid dynamics with a painter's touch. The Magnus effect, first described by Heinrich Magnus in 1852, explains why spinning balls curve through the air. The rotation changes air pressure on each side of the ball, creating sideways force. It's why soccer free kicks bend, tennis serves swerve, and baseball pitchers look like they're performing magic. Botaoshi, a Japanese sport played at the National Defense Academy, involves two teams of 150 cadets each. The goal is to topple the opponent's 3 to 5 meter pole while defending your own. The match looks like organized chaos. Part rugby, part martial arts, and part human pyramid gone wrong. Mozi, a Chinese philosopher of the 5th century BCE, promoted universal love but paired it with practical engineering. He designed defensive weapons, including siege machines, to protect cities from attack. His unusual blend of moral philosophy and military science made him both a thinker and a tactician ahead of his time. The Streisand effect, named after singer Barbra Streisand, describes how trying to suppress information can backfire. In 2003, her lawsuit to remove aerial photos of her Malibu home only made them famous. Since then, the term has applied to countless cases where censorship efforts achieve the opposite result. Art restorers sometimes attach a wooden cradle to the back of panel paintings, especially Renaissance works, to stop the wood from warping or splitting. This grid of support stabilizes fragile artworks but is controversial today, as cradling can restrict natural movement of the wood and cause new damage over time. The Monocton Rule, established in 1843 after Daniel Monocton's trial for assassination in Britain, sets the legal standard for insanity. It asks whether the defendant knew what they were doing or understood it was wrong. The test remains influential worldwide, though critics argue it oversimplifies complex mental health conditions. The Chimu culture of northern Peru, flourishing between the 9th and 15th centuries, crafted ceramic whistling vessels. When filled with water or tilted, they produced eerie sounds, sometimes imitating birds or wind. These artifacts combined art, music, and ritual, turning everyday objects into instruments with a haunting voice of their own. Sepak takraw, played across Southeast Asia, resembles volleyball, but with a twist. Players use only their feet, knees, chest, or head to strike the ball. Originating centuries ago, it demands acrobatic kicks and mid-air flips. Watching a match feels less like a ball game and more like a martial arts exhibition. The Mahabharata, composed in ancient India and attributed to Vyasa, is one of the longest epics ever written. At around 200,000 verse lines, it is nearly 10 times the length of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey combined. Beyond battles and gods, it weaves philosophy, law, and ethics into a vast cultural encyclopedia. A moire pattern emerges when two grids or striped designs are layered slightly out of alignment, creating a larger wavy interference image. It can appear in fabrics, screens, or printed images. What seems like optical trickery is simply physics reminding us that overlapping order can produce a surprising kind of chaos. Usufruct is a legal right, granting someone use and enjoyment of another's property without owning it. The condition: the property cannot be damaged or altered. Roman law formalized the concept, and it survives in civil law systems today. In essence, usufruct lets you borrow the fruit of an orchard without uprooting the trees. The so-called Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894 reflected fears that growing cities would drown in waste from horse-drawn transport. London predicted 9 feet of manure within decades. The crisis never happened. The invention of motor vehicles solved it, proving that sometimes one environmental disaster is replaced by another on wheels. The Tsiolkovsky rocket equation, formulated in 1903 by Russian scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, describes how a rocket's velocity depends on exhaust speed and the ratio of initial to final mass. It underpins modern astronautics, explaining why reaching orbit demands staging, fuel efficiency, and very large tanks for relatively small payloads. Shinty, a Scottish sport with ancient roots, resembles field hockey but allows players to strike the ball in the air and use both sides of the stick. Still played in the Highlands, it influenced the development of ice hockey in Canada. Fast, physical, and traditional, Shinty is Scottish heritage on a field. The Enshu style, founded by Enshu Ito Ryu in the 17th century Japan, blends martial arts with ikebana, the art of flower arrangement. Practitioners trained in both swordsmanship and aesthetics. The unlikely pairing reflects a samurai ideal: discipline and combat balanced by refinement and beauty. Violence and flowers coexisted under one philosophy. Respondet superior, Latin for let the master answer, is a legal doctrine making employers responsible for wrongful acts committed by employees during their work. Rooted in English common law, it explains why companies, not just individuals, are sued for workplace negligence. Responsibility in this sense trickles upward rather than down. The Rayleigh-Taylor instability occurs when a lighter fluid pushes into a heavier one. Think oil rising through water or the billowing edges of supernova clouds. First studied by Lord Rayleigh and Geoffrey Taylor, it produces striking wave-like patterns. Physics, it seems, can turn even turbulence into abstract art. Excavations at Gath, one of the 5 Philistine cities and traditionally home to Goliath, reveal a sophisticated culture with Aegean ties. Finds include impressive fortifications, pottery, and evidence of trade. Far from biblical caricatures, the Philistines appear as complex urban people, blending Mediterranean influences into their Levantine setting. The familiar red, yellow, green traffic light sequence was standardized in 1920 by Detroit police officer William Potts, adapting railroad signals for automobiles. His system helped tame chaotic intersections in an age before seatbelts and brake lights. A century later, his color scheme still dictates global driving habits with unblinking authority. Garnishment is a legal tool, allowing creditors to collect debts by taking a debtor's property or wages through a third party, such as an employer or bank. Courts authorize the process, ensuring repayment without requiring physical repossession. For debtors, it's a reminder that ignoring obligations can follow them straight to payday. The Poynting-Robertson effect, described by John Henry Poynting and Howard Percy Robertson, explains how solar radiation gradually robs dust grains in orbit of energy, pulling them inward toward the sun. It's a slow cosmic cleaning service, ensuring that even interplanetary dust can't spin lazily around forever. The Kingdom of Kush, based in Nubia, south of Egypt, conquered its neighbor in the 8th century BCE and ruled as the 25th dynasty. Kushite pharaohs like Paye and Taharqa are depicted with distinct features and cultural styles, blending African and Egyptian traditions. Their reign marked a remarkable reversal of power along the Nile. Kinball, invented in Quebec in 1986, is a sport where 3 teams of 4 players compete using a giant ball measuring 1.22 meters across. The serving team calls out another team's color, forcing them to catch it before it touches the ground. Strategy, speed, and teamwork matter, but so does not getting flattened. The medieval Icelandic sagas, written between the 12th and 14th centuries, recount tales of settlement, feuds, and exploration. Though filled with drama and stylization, they were treated as reliable history for centuries. Beyond battles, they record social customs, inheritance laws, and everyday life, making them an unusual blend of literature and anthropology. The Bearglass effect, named after British magician David Bearglass, is regarded as the holy grail of card tricks. A spectator names any card and any position in a shuffled deck, and the performer reveals it flawlessly. The method remains secret even among magicians, making the trick more legendary than explainable. Benford's law, observed by physicist Frank Benford in 1938, shows that in many datasets, the number 1 appears as the first digit about 30% of the time, while 9 appears less than 5%. It helps auditors detect fraud, since fake numbers often fail to follow this naturally skewed distribution. Eton Fives is a handball-like game played on a 3-walled court modeled after the architecture of Eton College's chapel steps. Teams of 2 strike a small leather ball with gloved hands, ricocheting it off walls and ledges. Popular at public schools in England, the game remains a curious hybrid of sport and architecture. The Uluburun shipwreck, discovered in 1982 off Turkey's coast, dates to the 14th century BCE. The cargo included copper ingots, tin, ivory, glass, and luxury goods from at least 7 cultures, linking the Near East, Africa, and Europe. It is one of the richest Bronze Age finds, revealing a world tied together by trade. The Birch and Swinnerton Dyer conjecture, proposed in the 1960s, is one of mathematics' 7 Millennium Prize problems. It concerns elliptic curves and whether they have finitely or infinitely many rational solutions. Despite decades of progress, a complete proof remains unsolved. Mathematicians still chase the $1 million prize attached to this elusive riddle. A spendthrift trust is a legal arrangement designed to protect a beneficiary's inheritance from wasteful spending or aggressive creditors. Trustees control the funds, releasing them under set conditions. Common in estate planning, it prevents heirs from gambling away their fortune, proving that sometimes the dead have better judgment than the living. The Laki eruption of 1783 in Iceland spewed lava across 600 square kilometers and released vast amounts of sulfur dioxide. The resulting haze caused crop failures, livestock deaths, and famine that killed about a quarter of Iceland's population. Its effects spread across Europe, reminding the continent how fragile life is under volcanoes. Xanadu, or Chengdu, built in 1256 as Kublai Khan's summer capital, blended Chinese urban design with Mongol nomadic traditions. Chinese architect Liu Bingzhong laid out the city with palaces, gardens, and hunting grounds. Marco Polo later described it with awe, though Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem made its name immortal in Western imagination. The Toda language, spoken by the Toda people of southern India's Nilgiri Hills, has one of the world's most complex sound systems. It includes 16 vowels and numerous consonants with subtle variations. Preserving it is vital as the language embodies cultural traditions, rituals, and songs unique to a small pastoral community. The Zollverein, established in 1834 under Prussian leadership, unified dozens of German states into a single customs union. By removing internal tariffs, it boosted trade and industrialization. Long before Germany's political unification in 1871, the Zollverein quietly stitched its economy together, proving money can bind what politics cannot. An inchoate offense is a legal term for crimes that are attempted but unfinished, like conspiracy, solicitation, or attempted robbery. Courts punish them to discourage people from planning harm, even if the act never succeeds. In law, intent matters almost as much as outcome, so thinking criminally can already be criminal. The Wilson cycle, named after geologist John Tuzo Wilson, describes how continents drift, break apart, form oceans, and eventually collide again. This cycle of rifting, spreading, and subduction takes hundreds of millions of years. It explains why the Atlantic Ocean is widening today and why it may someday vanish entirely. The quantum Zeno effect shows that constantly observing an unstable quantum system can actually stop it from changing. First noted in the 1970s, it's like staring at a pot of water so intently that it really never boils. In quantum mechanics, measurement itself becomes a kind of interference with time. Pelota Purepecha, a traditional Mexican game with pre-Hispanic origins, is played using curved wooden sticks to strike a ball, sometimes set on fire through a stone hoop. Still practiced in Michoacan, it resembles both hockey and ritual spectacle. Playing at night with a flaming ball is both dramatic and frankly slightly hazardous. Prussian blue, discovered accidentally in 1706 by Berlin color maker Johann Jakob Diesbach, was the first modern synthetic pigment. He was trying to make a red dye but produced a deep blue instead. The pigment became prized in painting, used by artists like Hokusai in his Great Wave, a mistake turned masterpiece. The Gish Gallop, named after creationist debater Duane Gish, is a rhetorical trick. Overwhelm your opponent with a barrage of weak arguments faster than they can be refuted. Each point may be flimsy, but taken together they create an illusion of strength. It's the debating equivalent of death by paper cuts. Probate is the legal process of proving a will's validity after someone dies. A court confirms the document as the deceased's true final testament and oversees the distribution of property. It provides order, but can be slow, meaning heirs often inherit both assets and long hours of paperwork. Valencian Pelota, a traditional sport from Spain's Valencia region, has several variants played either on streets or in specialized courts called trinquets. Players strike a heavy leather ball with bare hands, sometimes wrapped in minimal protection. With roots stretching back centuries, the game is as much cultural ritual as sport. The Haber-Bosch process, developed in 1909 by Fritz Haber and scaled industrially by Karl Bosch, synthesizes ammonia by combining nitrogen and hydrogen under high pressure and temperature. It made artificial fertilizers possible, sustaining billions of lives. The same process, however, also enabled production of explosives, feeding both agriculture and warfare. Cloth of gold, a fabric woven from silk and gold threads, was so precious in the Middle Ages that kings and nobles listed it in wills and treasuries. Its name lives on in the Field of the Cloth of Gold, a 1520 meeting between Henry VIII and Francis I, where politics was dressed in luxury. The Euthyphro dilemma, from Plato's dialogue Euthyphro, questions whether morality depends on divine command or exists independently. Is something good because the gods will it, or do they will it because it is good? This ancient puzzle remains central to debates in ethics, theology, and the philosophy of law. Nunc pro tunc, Latin for now for then, describes a court order that corrects a past ruling to match what the court originally intended. It doesn't change the law retroactively, but tidies up the record. Essentially, the legal system allows itself the occasional clerical time machine. The Oort cloud is a theoretical shell of icy bodies orbiting the sun at distances up to 200,000 astronomical units, proposed by Jan Oort in 1950. It is thought to be the source of long-period comets. Though unobserved directly, it represents the solar system's frozen outer archives. Pétanque, a French game in the Boulez family, involves tossing hollow steel balls toward a small wooden target called the cochonnet. Played on gravel, it emphasizes precision over strength. Popular in Mediterranean squares, pétanque is less about athleticism and more about strategy, patience, and perhaps a glass of pastis nearby. The Byzantine chain, a complex method of linking rings, creates a dense, flexible rope-like design. Historically used in both armor and jewelry, it balances strength with elegance. Its interwoven structure made it useful for protection in battle, while its intricate beauty ensured it never stayed confined to the battlefield. Amdahl's law, formulated by Jean Amdahl in 1967, calculates the maximum improvement in computing speed when parallel processing is applied. It shows that bottlenecks in non-parallel parts limit efficiency. In short, throwing more processors at a problem won't help if the real slowdown is in code that refuses to share. A non-disclosure agreement, or NDA, is a contract that binds parties to confidentiality about sensitive information. Common in business, it protects trade secrets, designs, or negotiations from leaking. While NDAs create trust and legal recourse, they are also infamous for being misused to silence criticism or keep inconvenient facts hidden. The Permian-Triassic extinction event, about 252 million years ago, was Earth's deadliest known mass extinction, likely triggered by massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia. It wiped out around 90% of marine species and 70% of land vertebrates. This great dying reshaped life on Earth, paving the way for the age of dinosaurs. The Barnum effect, named after showman P.T. Barnum, describes how people accept vague, general personality statements as uniquely accurate. Psychologist Bertram Ferrer demonstrated this in 1949 by giving students identical personalized profiles, which they rated highly. Horoscopes, fortune-telling, and online quizzes thrive on this curious bias in human self-perception. Underwater hockey, also called octopush, is played at the bottom of a swimming pool. Teams use short sticks to push a weighted puck into the opponent's goal trough while holding their breath. Invented in England in 1954, it combines the strategy of hockey with the lung capacity of very optimistic swimmers. The Domesday Book, completed in 1086 on the orders of William the Conqueror, recorded land holdings, resources, and taxes across England. It provided a snapshot of medieval society, who owned what, how much land was worth, and how many pigs were around. It remains one of history's most thorough tax audits. The Biefeld-Brown effect, first reported by physicist Paul Biefeld and engineer Thomas Townsend Brown in the 1920s, claims an electrical force arises from asymmetrical capacitor electrodes. While some touted it as anti-gravity, later experiments suggest the force is due to ionized air movement. Physics in this case is less magic than airflow. Taxila, located in present-day Pakistan, was a major learning center from the 5th century BCE to the 5th century CE. It hosted scholars in medicine, law, and philosophy, drawing students from across Asia and even Greece. Archaeological remains show monasteries and lecture halls, marking it as one of antiquities' great universities. Double jeopardy, rooted in English common law and enshrined in modern constitutions, prevents someone from being tried twice for the same offense after acquittal or conviction. The principle protects against abuse of power and endless retrials. Justice, it insists, should be fair, even if verdicts aren't always popular. The Pioneer anomaly puzzled scientists when Pioneer 10 and 11, launched in the early 1970s, drifted slightly off predicted trajectories. For years, exotic theories circulated. In 2012, careful analysis showed the cause. Uneven heat radiation from the spacecraft's systems nudged them gently off course. Mystery solved by thermodynamics, not aliens. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic began in 1962 at a girls' school in Tanzania, spreading uncontrollably through communities. Thousands were affected, with fits lasting hours or days. Doctors diagnosed it as a mass psychogenic illness triggered by stress. It's an unsettling reminder of how emotions, and even laughter, can spread like contagion. Orienteering is a competitive sport requiring participants to navigate between checkpoints using only a detailed map and a compass. Originating in Sweden in the late 19th century, it combines running with problem solving. Courses can span forests, mountains, or urban areas, making it equal parts athletics, geography lesson, and mental puzzle. The Hittites, centered in Anatolia around 1600 BCE, were among the first civilizations to systematically work iron. Their weapons and tools gave them military and economic advantages, helping them challenge Egypt and dominate the Late Bronze Age. This early mastery reshaped warfare and marked a turning point in human technology. The Laffer curve, popularized by economist Arthur Laffer in the 1970s, illustrates that beyond a certain point, raising tax rates reduces government revenue because people stop working or evade tax. While simple in theory, it remains politically controversial, often appearing in debates over tax cuts and fiscal policy. Damascening is the decorative art of inlaying precious metals like gold or silver into steel or iron, creating intricate designs. Practiced in places like Spain, Japan, and the Middle East, it adorned weapons, armor, and jewelry. The striking contrast between dark steel and gleaming metal made objects both functional and beautiful. A letter of marque and reprisal was a government license granting private ship owners, privateers, the right to attack and capture enemy vessels. Common from the 16th to 19th centuries, it blurred the line between piracy and legitimate warfare. Profitable but risky, it turned naval conflict into a semi-privatized business venture. The Kardashev scale, proposed by Soviet astronomer Nikolai Nikolai Kardashev in 1964 measures civilizations by energy use. Type 1 harnesses planetary energy, Type 2 captures the stars, and Type 3 controls the galaxies. Humanity isn't even Type 1 yet, which makes our ambitions for space empires a bit premature. The Gell-Mann amnesia effect, named by physicist Murray Gell-Mann, describes reading a news article on a subject you know and spotting obvious errors, then flipping the page and trusting the next story on a subject you don't know. It highlights how selective skepticism makes us oddly gullible. Fistball, a team sport resembling volleyball, is played outdoors with 5 players per side. The ball is struck with fists or forearms, allowed 1 bounce before return. Originating in Europe, it remains popular in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. The game combines precision with brute force, producing rallies that can stretch across fields. Susa in modern Iran was a major capital of the Achaemenid Empire and an important city for over 2 millennia. It appears in the Book of Esther as the setting of Persian court intrigue. Archaeology reveals palaces and ziggurats, showing its role as both political center and cultural crossroads. Bandy, often called the original ice hockey, is played on a rink the size of a soccer field with 11 players aside. Unlike hockey, players chase a small ball instead of a puck. Originating in 19th century England and popular in Russia and Scandinavia, it remains a fast, sweeping winter sport. Ziff's law, observed by linguist George Ziff in the 1930s, states that the frequency of a word is inversely proportional to its rank in usage. For example, the second most common word appears about half as often as the first. This odd mathematical regularity shows up in language, city sizes, and even wealth distribution. Micromosaic is the art of assembling detailed images from countless tiny pieces of glass or enamel, sometimes smaller than a millimeter. Perfected in the 18th century Vatican workshops, the technique decorated jewelry, tables, and devotional art. The astonishing precision creates works that look like paintings until viewed closely, where thousands of glittering fragments emerge. A per curiam decision is a court ruling issued collectively by an appellate bench, rather than authored by a single judge. Latin for by the court, it usually applies to unanimous or straightforward judgments. The anonymity emphasizes institutional voice over individual reasoning, judicial teamwork in its most formal expression. Runge-Kutta methods, named after German mathematicians Karl Runge and Wilhelm Kutta, are step-by-step techniques developed around 1900 to approximate solutions of differential equations. Widely used in engineering and physics, they allow complex problems, from modeling planetary motion to predicting chemical reactions, to be tackled by computer with manageable accuracy. The Tarim mummies, discovered in western China's Xinjiang region, date from 1800 BCE onward and display Caucasoid features, including red or blonde hair. Their wool textiles resemble European styles, suggesting early links across Eurasia. These remarkably preserved remains continue to challenge simple narratives about ancient migration and cultural exchange. The Ilbert Bill of 1883 in British India sought to allow Indian judges to try British subjects in criminal cases. The proposal sparked fierce opposition from Europeans, exposing deep racial hierarchies in colonial society. Though watered down, the controversy highlighted the limits of reform under empire and the fragility of British rule. Tandem surfing involves 2 riders, traditionally a man and a woman, sharing one board while performing acrobatic lifts and poses on a moving wave. Popularized in Hawaii in the 1950s, it combines the balance of surfing with the grace of dance and gymnastics. Success depends on timing, strength, and trust between partners. The Biot-Savart law, named after Jean-Baptiste Biot and Félix Savart, describes the magnetic field generated by a steady electric current. Published in 1820, it shows how current-carrying wires produce fields that curve through space. The law is still used to calculate magnetism in devices from solenoids to electric motors. Kyoto, Japan's imperial capital from 794 to 1868, housed emperors for more than a millennium. Known for wooden townhouses, Zen gardens, and thousands of temples, it preserved traditional culture even as political power shifted to Edo. Today it remains the cultural heart of Japan, a city where centuries of heritage coexist with modern life. Gauss's law for magnetism, part of Maxwell's equations, states that the divergence of a magnetic field is 0. In simpler terms, there are no isolated magnetic poles. North and south always come as pairs. The principle captures the symmetry of magnetism, even though physicists still wonder if magnetic monopoles might exist. Fraud is the intentional act of deceiving someone to secure unlawful or unfair gain. It spans false advertising, forged documents, and financial scams. In legal systems worldwide, fraud is both both civil and criminal, reflecting society's view that dishonesty in pursuit of profit undermines trust as much as it steals money. Rome, the eternal city, has stood at the center of politics, religion, and culture for over 2,500 years. From the Roman Republic and Empire to the papacy, it shaped Western civilization. Monuments like the Colosseum, the Forum, and St. Peter's Basilica trace its continuous influence from antiquity to the present. Snell's law, discovered by Willibrord Snellius in 1621, relates the angles of incidence and refraction when light passes between two media, like air and water. The formula explains why a stick looks bent in a pond and underlies technologies from lenses to fiber optics. Refraction, it turns out, is predictably mathematical. American football developed in the late 19th century from rugby and soccer, evolving unique features like the forward pass and line of scrimmage. Walter Camp, known as the father of American football, helped codify its rules. Today, the sport is central to US culture, producing massive stadiums, rivalries, and the Super Bowl spectacle. Bragg's Law, discovered in 1913 by William Henry Bragg and his son William Lawrence Bragg, gives the angles at which X-rays are diffracted by a crystal lattice. The principle allows scientists to determine atomic structures, revolutionizing crystallography. Its applications include mapping DNA's double helix and analyzing complex proteins. Florence, birthplace of the Renaissance, flourished under the Medici family in the 15th century. Its landmarks include Brunelleschi's Duomo, Botticelli's works in the Uffizi Gallery, and Michelangelo's David. The city's blend of art, architecture, and finance reshaped Europe, turning Florence into a crucible of creativity and intellectual revival. Wien's displacement law, formulated by Wilhelm Wien in 1893, states that the peak wavelength of blackbody radiation is inversely proportional to temperature. Hotter objects radiate at shorter wavelengths, explaining why flames glow red, then white, and stars range from red dwarfs to blue giants. Temperature in physics reveals its color. The de Broglie hypothesis, introduced in 1924 by French physicist Louis de Broglie, proposed that particles like electrons have wave-like properties. His idea was confirmed by electron diffraction experiments and became central to quantum mechanics. De Broglie's insight blurred the boundary between matter and waves, reshaping physics in the 20th century. St. Petersburg, founded by Peter the Great in 1703, was built as Russia's window to Europe. It served as the imperial capital for over 200 years, featuring Baroque palaces, neoclassical avenues, and canals. Later renamed Petrograd and Leningrad, it remains one of Russia's cultural centers, famed for the Hermitage and the Mariinsky Theater. Compton scattering, discovered by Arthur Compton in 1923, describes how photons scatter inelastically off electrons, transferring energy and changing wavelength. The effect confirmed that light behaves like particles as well as waves. Compton's work earned a Nobel Prize, reinforcing quantum theory's challenge to classical ideas of radiation. The photoelectric effect, first explained by Albert Einstein in 1905, occurs when light shining on a material ejects electrons. Its discovery confirmed that light behaves as discrete quanta, or photons. The effect laid the groundwork for quantum mechanics and modern technologies like solar panels and photosensors, winning Einstein the Nobel Prize. Prague, capital of the Czech Republic, is famed for its Gothic, Baroque, and Romanesque architecture. Highlights include the Old Town Square, the Charles Bridge, and Prague Castle, the world's largest ancient castle complex. Nicknamed the City of 100 Spires, it has been a cultural crossroads in Europe for over a millennium. Rutherford scattering, discovered by Ernest Rutherford in 1911, describes how charged particles, like alpha particles, scatter elastically when deflected by atomic nuclei through Coulomb forces. His gold foil experiment revealed that atoms are mostly empty space with a dense central nucleus. This finding overturned the plum pudding model and reshaped atomic theory. Vienna, once the capital of the Habsburg Empire, became a hub of politics, music, and culture in Europe. Its imperial palaces, like Schönbrunn and the Hofburg, reflect centuries of grandeur, home to Mozart, Beethoven, and Strauss. The city also pioneered cafe culture, turning coffee houses into centers of intellectual life. The Zeeman effect, discovered by Peter Zeeman in 1896, is the splitting of spectral lines into multiple components when atoms are placed in a magnetic field. The effect provided crucial crucial evidence for electron behavior and quantum theory. Today it's used in astrophysics to measure magnetic fields in distant stars and galaxies. The Stark effect, named after Johannes Stark, who discovered it in 1913, is the shifting or splitting of atomic and molecular spectral lines under an external electric field. It provided experimental support for early quantum models. The principle is widely applied in spectroscopy and plasma physics to analyze atomic structures. Budapest, the capital of Hungary and the Pearl of the Danube, combines Buda's historic hills with Pest's vibrant boulevards. Known for its thermal baths, neo-Gothic parliament, and grand bridges, the city flourished under Austro-Hungarian rule. Today, it remains a cultural crossroads, blending Ottoman, Baroque, and modern European influences. Fencing, rooted in European dueling traditions, is a modern combat sport featuring 3 weapons: foil, épée, and saber. Governed by precise rules and electronic scoring, it emphasizes speed, reflexes, and strategy. Olympic since 1896, fencing blends martial skill with athletic precision, turning swordplay into a discipline of controlled elegance. Amsterdam, capital of the Netherlands, is renowned for its canals, 17th century gabled houses, and artistic heritage. Once a major trading hub of the Dutch Golden Age, it nurtured painters like Rembrandt and Vermeer. Today, it balances historic charm with modern vibrancy, cycling culture, and an enduring reputation as the Venice of the North. The Lamb shift, discovered by Willis Lamb in 1947, is a small difference in energy between the two S1/2 and two P1/2 states of hydrogen. This subtle effect, caused by quantum electrodynamics and vacuum fluctuations, confirmed that empty space is not truly empty. Lamb's work earned a Nobel Prize and reshaped atomic physics. We started this video chasing curiosity without a plan, and 183 facts later, I hope you're leaving with more wonder than you came with. If you enjoyed the journey, stay connected by liking, subscribing, and joining me again for the next round of useless knowledge worth remembering.